At the first protest, the police arrested 39 people. It cost around $1,400 in bail money. When they appeared in court the next morning, the $50 bail was ordered by the magistrate to be put forward to the fine, and that happened in every case. When the 113 were arrested outside the stadium gates, there was $14,000 bail. And when the 228 were arrested here in the city, it was another $30,000 bail, adding up to a total of nearly $60,000 in bail money, which went to the government.
It's called Guniwaya Ngigu. Guniwaya Ngigu. I thought that film was the best I've ever done. I loved every minute of it. And especially the way it was the first time ever in this country that all the mob came together. Fabio Cavadini and his brother, he approached me and said, would I be interested in to go and do some training? And so they put me on. They got the funds from Aboriginal employment. I was able to go out with sets, so I think I went to Canberra and went up to the Northern Territory, just wanting to learn. And I think I got involved then with, like Martha and Sarah and those, you know, it was good around that time to help us pick up the camera and learn. When I was there, I also got Johnny Bales, another young Aboriginal guy, to come and do the training, and that's when I'd done the road trips, and we had a great time with the films, and he loved it as well. And so we had I had the idea, and I talked to his family and some of the others, and we decided to set up a company, and we called it the Black Film Unit. We put a submission together to the Film Commission, and I think we got $60,000, and that was when We Fight came up. Yeah, Johnny was involved, and then his family was involved. His mum, Maureen Watson, you know, I hope she rests in peace now, but Maureen Watson was one, and Tiger Bales was the other. I think Maureen had a little bit of experience in doing some interviews around town and different places. And Johnny was really good, he came through with the sound. So yeah, we got that going through a lot of determination and guts. That was the journey of our first film.
There was a group of people organising the protests who'd been meeting for many years. In fact, we were a cross-border group. It didn't matter where we were living, we stayed in touch with each other. And what we were doing was constantly campaigning to end the acts in Queensland, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander acts, because of the discrimination. And we picked up that campaign from the old people who'd waged this battle when they were members of FCATSI, the Federal Council for the Advancement of Aborigines and Torres Strait Islanders, from the 1950s onwards. So this was a decades-long, campaign because of the extreme discrimination and suppression that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people suffered in Queensland under those acts.
There was all this constant communication long before the protest happened. There was probably 6 months at least between Redfern, the New South Wales Aboriginal sort of community generally. In Adelaide, it was through the Aboriginal welfare organisations. In Victoria, it was through Health Service, Legal Service, Aboriginal Advancement League, the Women's Council. We had a Federation of Aboriginal Women's Council based in King Street, Melbourne.
In Queensland, they've set up these reserves, Aboriginal reserves. Well, in actual fact, they're concentration camps. People are not allowed to leave without a permit, not allowed to go back in without a permit. They work for substandard wages. There's entry to their houses is just whenever the manager or the white or black police think that, they just do it. It's very oppressive. The act itself breaks a large number of the conventions under the United Nations Declaration for Human Rights. In fact, it breaks more than the Apartheid Act in South Africa.
By and large, people had a great sense of camaraderie, because life was very, very hard for most Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. You know, we were openly discriminated against in most establishments. You know, we certainly couldn't go to an RSL or a golf club. So, you know, that kind of racism was a commonality across our populations and not understood by Australians, and in fact denied by Australians, and denied in terms of a highly racist discourse, as if it was the natural way of the world to have, you know, a fascist like Joh Bjelke-Petersen running the state, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people treated the way we were.
There was a Greyhound bus called the Roadrunner, organised, that went up from the Aboriginal Advancement League it left from in Cunningham Street, Northcote. The invite was for all of Victoria to jump on the bus. There were people like Bill Belling, and there was, you know, some of the Edwards boys. There was Calvin Onus. There was the Onus, sorry, Sandra Onus and Tracy Onus. There was Darren Briggs. There was Gavin Cooper. Alan Lovett. So there was like so many people. But I'll never forget when we got to, pretty sure it was Moree, and we had to fill the petrol tank up. And 3 or 4 of the boys got off to get some lollies and things. And I remember someone jumped back on the bus and said they won't serve us. And I was quite shocked, because I'd never been refused service. You know, I've been served last in milk bars all over Melbourne, but never just blank, we're not serving you.
There was a group formed in Musgrave Park which we called the National Black Unity Group, a fairly loosely formed committee
We'll make you a sandwich, okay?
that began from the time the tents went up here, I guess, and operated very effectively during the last 2 weeks. It was a group which didn't have time for internal fighting. It didn't have time to develop leadership. There was a few of us who came into a position of being spokespeople, but any decisions that were made about what action we were going to take about the functioning of things in the camp or on the streets, those decisions were made by all the people here. That we were very, very aware of the dangers of a leadership situation developing.
They had this big tent, that was the food tent, and then they had a medical tent and counselling, and it was just done so, just absolutely, really, really well, you know. The organisation, of course, a lot of that was done with some of the Bales and a lot of the community people of Brisbane.
So Musgrave Park was the gathering place for all of the protesters, and it's where the marches usually proceeded from. And I can remember thinking as we were crossing the bridge into the city, because, you know, there was a day when we were organising to protest outside Roma Street Station, that, you know, here we are breaching the, you know, the colour line that had been established by the Americans.
We were disciplined in terms of told, okay, you and you go and help the girls in the kitchen, because, you know, serving up all the food, because you got to remember they were serving food for over 1,000 people every day. Like, you imagine catering for 20 people, imagine catering for 1,000, and which meant lots of buckets of liquids, which is a lot of heavy work, you know. And they were mainly women behind those hot plates and things. So they said, okay, you boys, you look after that. You do shifts, so you 4 do it today, you 4 do it tomorrow, you 4 do it the next day. For me, the amazing thing was, it was the first time for me I'd met people from every state and territory, just about, in one spot. You know, so one day I'm talking to people from Catherine, the Northern Territory, and then the same afternoon I'm talking to people from WA, the Kimberley, and then, you know, the next day I'm talking to someone from South Australia, Pitjantjatjara people.
And all these little petty politicians politicking with each other and trying to take down the system and justify the system, I'm afraid that's not good enough for us. Because we are here, and whatever we decided on, which is what happened last night, we will abide by, and we are going to march. Tomorrow, we are going to march. We're not worried about getting our heads kicked in or getting a bullet in the head. I just left my 3 children to come down here, and I want results. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm a mother of children, and I tell you what, my children will get it better, as far as I'm concerned, than what I've got it.
And I want to just reflect on the women's role, which was so out there. They were leading the fight, they were leading the marches, and I just loved it, and I wanted to capture that, you know, that there's just strong black women out there. And I just want to touch on that one of Priscilla Pryor. And we were having a time when we were having supposed to be quiet meetings in the Musgrave Park. And I remember saying that I want you to know that I came down here, I left my kids at home, I left 3 children at home, and I came here to make it better for them. And I don't care whether I get killed tomorrow, but I want to leave a legacy for my children.
You know, Queensland politics was very much shaped by women leaders, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women leaders, and other black women, you know, like, as I say, Faith Bandler, who was from, you know, living in Sydney, was a South Sea Islander, but you know, she worked with all of the old Whakatsi leaders. Many of the key strategic meetings were in fact convened by Kath Walker, who, you know, later called herself Udjuru Noonuckle. And I can remember being at a meeting where she was basically laying out the strategy which everybody adopted without argument, because, you know, she'd been around for so long and understood these matters so well and had great respect from everybody. But the Queensland Police were always vicious and brutal, as they still are, and no less so towards women than men. So, you know, the sort of extent of the hatred of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people by the Queensland Police was on full display. And, you know, the women rocked up and were just as courageous as the men. Even more so, most of the time.
See me or Cam Jones from Birra. We need bail money. We need cash for bail money. At least 9 people have been arrested. Maureen Watson has been arrested. Bob Weatherall, Los Melzer, Ross Watson. Who owns this? Billy, is that yours? What's her name? Well, all I know is her name's Donna, and she's from Victoria. I've got her here. Yeah, Donna. Yeah. She's not a child money. Here are the names that we've got. Here are the names of the people arrested. Is this yours or yours? Once you've got enough money.
Right, we'll go to South America now.
When they were raising the funds for the bail money, and I was standing out the front in the front of the tent, and this car pulled up and ran over to me and gave me this bag, brown paper bag, and I said, "What's this?" And he said, "No, there's some bail money in it." So I took it straight over to Ross Watson. And I sort of it definitely played a big role around the organisation of the fight. But also she was really full on about collecting money, you know, and raising awareness about our mob being locked up. And and we needed money for their bail. So she done a fantastic job with that one.
Yeah, Marcia was part of the, helped with the organising of that kind of side of things with the legal services. And I think they raised about $60,000 in the end, which was in those days. Now that'd probably be $250,000. So it was quite amazing. When I got arrested the final time, it was about 207 of us arrested. That was when we got to the actual QE2 gates. We sat down. But there was also in the city, there were like 139 of us. Or I don't know, there was a lot anyway. I think in the end, there was probably around 300 odd people arrested.
Special branch. Don't do
that again or I'll lock you out.
Don't push, Marco. Get a call.
This guy was a detective, yeah. They had a special name for him, like the special branch, that's what they were called. And he was saying, don't come any closer or I'll lock you up. There was a group of them and we could always pick them out, and they followed us around. And at one stage there was this van parked near our car and Stephen Robinson was with me and he said, I think there's something going on here. And we went over and we looked through the windows and it was packed with all the equipment. They were recording everything.
A lot of the black women, they escorted him out and was screaming abuse at him. But his response was quite interesting because he initially was pretending he was a journalist. Like, I'm just from the Brisbane Courier. He was trying to give off that kind of vibe. But you could, if you had any nous at all, you could tell pretty quickly this guy was a cop. It took him about 15 seconds to go from, hey, I'm just a journalist, to, you do that again, I'm going to arrest you. It's like, ooh, now you're a cop. So I thought that was hilarious.
Well, there's been two kinds of harassment as far as the police are concerned, because they drive along the streets in cars, 6 and 7 cars. They park over the other side of the road, just up the back up here. So they just sit there and the people just don't know what to expect from them. Wednesday morning about 2 o'clock, 20 carloads of police came screaming in through this camp with sirens blaring, blue lights flashing, and arrested 2 kids for no apparent reason. They reckon they'd knocked a car off or something. A tent was knocked down, and just lucky that no one was hurt.
These 2 guys was from Melbourne. I used to remember their names, now I can't think. And the other guy was from New South Wales. But yeah, and it was a scene just after what happened that night, like the police drove through in front of those little tents.
The cops said these 2 kids who were like 12, 11, they had stolen a car that day, and this is what the cops said. And these kids are now hiding in Musgrave Park in one of these tents, and we're going to, arrest them or whatever. And they came tearing. I think it was like 2 a.m. Everyone's dead to the world asleep, and all of a sudden you just hear this car. And you imagine how terrifying that is when your tent's got no windows at all, so you can't even see when the car's about to run over you.
I remember we had the screening of We Fight at Brisbane, and we had a packed house, and all the coppers, all the detectives who was in the film as well, they were all there, and it was great. Oh, standing ovation, and I loved it. And I went back up to the room, and just myself and the editor was in the room, and up came the Watson family, and they were all big, healthy, big, strong men, and they came in and took the film from me. There was only 2 copies we had, and that's when I came home and I made the decision about never ever going to be involved in filmmaking again. I was lucky to meet up with Nick Power, and we worked hard and put that film together on bits and pieces that we had. And so that's what you get today. I'd gone up to Brisbane. I don't like talking about Tiger because they're all past. But you know, to try and make amends with him, but it never ever happened. And so there was this the really bad feelings and conflict came through very strong. And I applied to the Film Sound Mob and Film Commission, trying to get some money to repair it, because by the time Maureen and them didn't really know and understand what happened to film. And you know, she had it in a laundry, in a cupboard in the laundry, and you know what happens then. After 20 years, it was all stuck together. It was hard when we got back to Sydney. I had a little baby I was trying to look after, and I tried to get some of the people to come in and help us, and couldn't get anybody. And the Black Film Unit, whom I trusted, whom I thought was going to be the ones who was going to help out. But there certainly was some conflict with the Watsons and the Bales family.
But it's funny because Gary Foley, for years and years and years, you know, being friends with Madeline, he was always talking about this film that was underneath her bed. He'd always keep talking about this film. There's a film, she's underneath her bed. She's got hundreds of hours of footage, but she can't get the funding to cut it and edit it. You know, it's had under her bed for years and years. You talk about that often, you know. But there were so many community leaders that were in it. You know, people that were nobodies at that time who rose to prominence. You know, like Monica Morgan. You know, she's interviewed one-on-one with her then husband Kevin Wyman. You know, she went on to lead the native title, you know, determination for Victoria, the first one ever. She was 22 years old in that film. Cheryl Buchanan, you know, again, you know, she was a young woman in that film. Went on to become one of the most prominent activists. Lionel Fogarty, you know, a young man who went on to, it still is one of our greatest ever poets. He's a poet, as far as I'm concerned, a poet laureate of Australia, you know. Uncle Jock Austin was there, the guy that created the Fitzroy Stars, the first ever Aboriginal football team, you know, in Melbourne. You know, women that, like Marge Thorpe, went on to become the first ever in Australia Victoria Aboriginal Health Service. Those are all young people in their 20s. In Adelaide and Perth and in Brisbane, organisations were created out of groups of people getting together as a result of that protest. Yeah, when the time it was premiered, you know, I mean, I think it had to be at least 30, 35 years later. I think a lot of us were just relieved that seeing all the hard work that Madeline had done and Tracy Moffat had done, and yeah, you know, the team had done, and Auntie Maureen, you know, I think we were just happy that for all that effort that had got some airplay. I think we all knew it was such historical footage. Like, for Australian history, it was such important footage. The thing to remember too is that in the 80s, it was, you know, it was still quite rare for an Australian woman to be a director of a film as well, let alone a producer, but, you know, even to be a director, or a lead actress, you know, to be the lead in a story in a film. You know, they're all about men. So if it was that hard for any Australian, it was doubly hard for an Aboriginal woman, you know.
Because it is a part of the truth of our history, and it's been suppressed, sadly. It's a very important part of our history. Most young people have never heard of the 1982 protests. They didn't know about it. It was a massive protest. I think at one stage there must have been about 50,000 people at it. And that was 50 years ago, you know. And
it was a team effort, knowing and seeing all these people come from all different cultures and different places, and you could feel it. It was so much love and so much support with one another, and I think that's why we was able to get what we wanted with the film. And along with that there was lots of good friendships made, and lots of people came out fighting, and they're still doing that. The same people who attended that protest, you know, and so it really, really did shine for us.